everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Just had on parent Randy Lutz. This is the big story that was on GoLocal today. His 6th grade son JJ with cerebral palsy, who was in a wheelchair, was on a bus that was stuck yesterday in between school and home with other students in wheelchairs. The lift was stuck, the back door was open. Randy had to go and pick him up and wanted to talk about some of the issues he finds as a parent dealing with the schools with a child with needs. So I appreciate his taking the time to come in here to the studio to explain with us a little bit more about what that entails. Randy Lutz, thank you. But I want to welcome our next guest now into the studio. He's been here before. Big news this week, Chris Callaci, UNAP General Counsel, is around the corner. I want to welcome him in to talk about the new plan at Memorial. Chris, thanks for coming in.
Nice to see you again.
I'm not sure if you've been in the chair before, but have a seat.
I haven't, but
there's a first time for everything.
Very good.
So talk with us a little bit. You know, we saw that dual releases often happens when there's different entities involved. Care New England puts theirs out, UNAP puts theirs out, up to 200 jobs to be ultimately saved at Memorial. Talk with us about the construct of what this will look like. It was outlined in both of the releases, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts because, again, such a hot button issue, the jobs at Memorial. What does the structure look like under Care New England? Is it under their umbrella, or is it still under a Memorial one?
Well, it'll be, my understanding is that it'll be under the Care New England umbrella. There's a shift there from a full-service community-based hospital to what I would describe as a healthcare center. And so you have the family practice, the internal medicine, a variety of clinics that'll be open, and a walk-in clinic that could be considered like an urgent care center.
Okay.
And we think that there will be a need in that community for those services, so it's a different kind of healthcare model.
So a different model, and talk with us a little bit. When we saw the announcement, we saw, you know, some elected officials try to take credit for it, but was it not the lawsuit threat from UNAP that really brought everyone to the table to affect change here?
Thanks for the question, because I will tell you that there were regular meetings, weekly meetings that were taking place with the governor's staff, with Mayor Grebby and his staff, Care New England. I don't know if the Department of Health was involved in that or not, but I can tell you who was not at those meetings. And the union was not at those meetings. The governor didn't pick up the phone and invite us, nor did Care New England. Mayor Grebbian was terrific. He was going to the meetings and saying, look, the union's a major stakeholder. We represent the nurses and all the licensed professionals who are at the bedside. How can they not be at the table? But his request fell on deaf ears. So we weren't at those meetings, number one. Number two, we thought that the regulatory process was moving along way too quickly. We thought that the information that had been submitted by Care New England on what they were modeling in terms of services and jobs was flimsy. It was inadequate. It lacked detail. And so we had just about enough and decided that we would take the bull by the horns. We would file a lawsuit, and I will tell you, Kate, that it was no coincidence that the day after that lawsuit was filed, the phone rang, Care New England was on the other end, and we had our own separate meetings with them, and we spent 2 or 3 days together negotiating over what the healthcare model would look like. And I'm proud to say that the union was there to make sure that there was a written, enforceable agreement that called for services and jobs in that community, which did not look like it was going to happen up until the point in time when we filed that lawsuit.
So let's talk a little bit about moving forward with the financial position that Care New England is in. So up to 200 jobs, but assurances for these workers working for a company that's in a very precarious financial situation.
Well, so they're in a precarious financial situation, but this healthcare model is based on the experience that Care New England has had up on that campus for a while. There were, I think, roughly 20,000 patients who visited that primary care and family care medicine practice. We know that there were approximately 29 to 30,000 visits to the emergency department in fiscal year 2017. There is a demand there, and so we think that the inpatient services, which will no longer be available, will nevertheless give way to this healthcare facility up there. And part of our agreement is that there will be joint community outreach, multilingual, We hope we can get Mayors Diasa and Grebian involved, along with Care New England and the union. Go out into that community, encourage them to continue to come for those services. And quite frankly, we think that that walk-in clinic will grow and the volume will grow. And I think Dr. Finale said as much when he did his interviews with the press yesterday. So we're hopeful.
And where Care New England stands, but where things stand with the partners per se. If another entity is to come in, take over Care New England, any assurances there with a future entity?
Well, I don't know what a future entity, let's say a partner's, what their view would be in that regard, but I will tell you that we'll be involved in any regulatory review of a deal between Care New England and partners. We'll play a constructive role, and we'll ask that they get behind those services that have been carved out up in that community, because they're important to have, and I don't have any reason to believe that anybody would balk at that as long as there was a need, and I believe there is.
And you, again, had that meeting with Care New England after not having been at the table moving forward. I mean, was this really a pivotal moment for UNAP and the future of healthcare at Memorial Hospital?
It was pivotal and it was critical. I don't know what the Department of Health was going to do. I don't know what the governor was going to do. I know what Mayor Grebian, to his credit, was trying to do, but here's what I do know. There was no written enforceable agreement to preserve services and jobs in that community, and it was not until we sat down and met with Care New England in the wake of the filing that lawsuit that agreement was struck, and I'm very proud that the union played that role, because I don't know what would have happened had we not played that role.
And talk with us a little bit, you're on general counsel, sort of behind the scenes, pull the curtain back. When you filed that lawsuit, how long had that been in the works? How long does it take to file a lawsuit of this magnitude?
We spent a couple of 3 weeks working on that. We had availed ourselves of an opportunity to testify at the public hearings that were held by the director of the Department of Health. And at those hearings, we pointed out that we thought the application materials were inadequate, that there was no provision for jobs and services. We did not feel like we were getting through. And so we started thinking about that lawsuit and doing the research and starting to draft the complaint probably a couple of weeks before we filed it. But when it became clear that Mayor Grebian's requests that we be at those meetings were falling on deaf ears, and we didn't know where the Department of Health was going, it looked like they were moving at a breakneck speed, we thought, you know what, we will not stand down, we will stand up, and we'll make something happen here, and that's what we did.
So you had conversations with Care New England, hammered out this agreement. Have you had still conversations with the Department of Health or the governor's office?
I've had no conversations with anybody from the governor's office. That's the way they want it to be, and they got what they wanted. In terms of the Department of Health, I had no conversations with them other than what we testified to at the 2 public hearings. That's I guess that's okay, but you would think that if they were gathering information from the community, that the union would be a good place to go. We've been in the middle of the entire change in the healthcare landscape in this state, from the receivership at Landmark to the receivership at Westerly to the joint venture of Charter Care and Prospect to the St. Joe's pension collapse to the affiliation of Memorial with Care New England. We've been in the thick of things from day one. I would like to think that we will be in the middle of this going forward, whether people want us to be or not.
You will be in the middle of it. Now, you did mention sort of the next steps, trying to engage both Pawtucket and Central Falls with both the mayors there to outreach to the community to let them know just what services are going to still be available. But apart from that, what's next as it pertains to Memorial Hospital?
Well, we're going to have to work through this transition period where people are being laid off, because there are going to be layoffs, and trying to match positions that are vacant with folks who are leaving because of a layoff, and help get them to transition and fill some of those vacancies. We've been working with the Department of Labor and Training. Director Scott Jensen and his staff have been absolutely terrific in helping set up job fairs with not just getting a job within the Care New England system, but outside of the system. So we're trying to find people work if they're not going to be able to stay, and fill some of those up to 200 jobs that remain behind.
Well, I appreciate, as always, your accessibility. The announcement was made yesterday. I wanted to come through and kind of walk through what the nuts and bolts of it are moving forward. Anything else while you're still here, Chris, before we let you go, that you want folks to know?
All I would say is that your reporting on this is terrific. I appreciate the interest in this story. These hospitals are major employers, and they provide services to tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders, and I'm glad it's getting the attention that you give it, because if you didn't, folks might not know the gravity of these kinds of situations, especially in assistance with the closure of a hospital. I thank you for your reporting.
Well, I appreciate it. Chris Callaci, we'll have you back in soon, I'm sure. I'll let you go around the corner, and I'll let folks know here what's next.
All right.
Okay, Chris
Thanks,
Callaci,
Kate.
thank you. Chris Callaci, General Counsel for UNAP, the announcement made yesterday that they are looking to preserve up to 200 jobs at Memorial Hospital, now again in conjunction with Care New England, who jointly made their own announcement pertaining to the situation. But interesting to have Chris in here, who told us that leading up until that point, we're not involved. UNAP was not involved sitting around the table with the Governor's Office, Department of Health, and the city of Pawtucket as they were looking to find a future for Memorial. It was when he said he believes the threat of the lawsuit about how the closure was moving forward prompted them to make these actions. So speaking of actions, here we are at the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center, but we're gonna go off campus here, and you can find us back on Facebook shortly. A story that GoLocal ran today, the Providence Preservation Society and others are opposed to Brown University's master plan, which would demolish an additional 5 historic houses to make way for a new art center. The Providence Planning Commission is meeting at 4:45, so we're going to tack over there again on Facebook. We'll be streaming live from there to let folks know what's taking place with, again, that opposition to those demolitions. So we will have that for you again on GoLocal Live on Facebook. But we'll be back here tomorrow at 3 o'clock with The Taste. I heard it's sweet things. It is the season to have desserts. Rick Simone is going to have a great lineup for you at 3 tomorrow. I'll be back with news and politics for you at 4. We appreciate your tuning in. But again, don't go too far. Catch us on Facebook when we're up at the Providence Planning Commission meeting very shortly. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. GoLocal News Editor Kate